I'm here with Rob Lewis, an advocate out in Washington County. I wanted to have Rob out because he is, among the many things that he does, including the founder of the Westside Bike Happy Hour. He also started several months ago a Westside Critical Mass ride that meets once a month. And the last time they did it, which I think was Saturday, September 27th, they actually got pulled over by
Yeah.
Hillsboro police officers. So, Rob, thanks for coming in and chatting about this. So I think the best thing to do to start us off is to just give us the rundown. What happened
Yeah.
on Saturday?
Yeah. Well, uh, thanks for having me on, Jonathan. Greatly appreciate it. Always a big fan. Essentially, the ride got pulled over pretty much half a mile before the end point. And this ride was about a 10-mile ride going from Cascade Bikes into Hillsboro, meeting up at the newest bike shop in Hillsboro. That's the Salmonberry Cycle bike shop. Anyways, so that's the ride route. Group got stopped once they were already inside inner Hillsboro in that area where there's single direction, two lanes of road and cars parked on both sides of the street. And basically they were originally, from what I hear, the police were rather mm, they were a bit aggressive and came in kind of hot-headed. But thankfully, the ride leader of the day, as well as one of our other workers, they stepped up. They handled the situation quite professionally. They calmly de-escalated the officers involved. They politely explained that the group was riding lawfully. They referenced the ORS requirements, the legal rules, which if you want to check it out, it's ORS 814.430 2.C. Now, a lot of our riders carry these as a sticker on their bike, just for quick reference. I recommend, at least on the west side, hit us up at Bike Happy Hour and we can hook you up with a sticker for that as well. Anyways, so the ride leader and the corker, they were able to pretty much flip the script on the cops, and I think they actually collected the business cards of the two officers involved and then filed a complaint with the Hillsboro PD, basically under the premise of the cops unnecessarily harassing the bike ride, which, frankly, the group was in the right. What likely occurred was an angry driver stuck behind the ride, called in, called in to complain. Uh, it's really sad, frankly. I mean, this was the fifth ride that we've done as a critical mass party ride out on the west side. We've been riding busy roads in good fashion of that kind of ride. We do cork the ride for rider safety, but frankly, our rides have been small. Like, the first ride was 50 people, and then we were at like 30 some people the second ride, and the third, fourth, and this ride have all been 15 to 20 riders at most. So it's all pretty small. Like, it's not like a Portland ride where we're taking over the intersection for 5 minutes waiting for a cyclist to come through. I would love that, by all means. I would absolutely love that. But we get through the intersection just fine. We're not holding up traffic too much. There's a couple instances where, if we're riding along Baseline or riding along Walker, going from Beaverton out to Hillsboro, you know, we we do take the lane, even if there's a bike lane. But again, that's for the safety of the ride, and frankly, I believe falls into that our ORS code as well, because we're protecting the safety of the riders involved. So
Just to be clear, folks were when you got pulled over, this wasn't even a situation where there was a bike lane, because that's like the only time where there's going to be some ambiguity with Oregon law, right? Oregon traffic law,
correct.
where a cop you could see reasonably might think, you can have a conversation about whether you should have been in the bike lane or not, but there was no bike lane. It was literally like a lane of travel, and there was nowhere else for y'all to ride.
Yep. Yep. And there were
It,
cars parked on both sides of the road. And in fact, I believe from where the ride was stopped, there was in fact an additional travel lane. It's a two lane one-way road. So cars could have gone around the ride as it was. Like, it was pretty much like just absolute unnecessary stop, an illegal stop, and basically just a way to harass the group. As soon as the cops realized that they kind of were in over their head, and that the riders, our ride leader and our corker knew the law better than themselves, their tone pretty much changed. And immediately we're like, oh, well, we're here to make sure you guys are riding safely, and we're looking out for you. And like
Classic. Oh
basically
boy.
just making excuses over
Yeah.
heckling the group. And frankly, like particularly knowing how police can behave in the greater Portland area, I think as a rider that can be quite scary, right? And at least uncomfortable. And that's never a position I would ever want the riders on the west side ever be in.
Yeah. Good lesson in not just having the law in hand or in your head, but having something printed or some official thing. But also, like you said, I think I heard you say the ride leaders came at it without a bunch of emotion, without
Correct.
trying to get mad, which sometimes is reasonable to have that reaction, but that's probably those are probably the big reasons why the police officers were willing to kind of just shift their demeanor. They also don't like getting in trouble for, so they probably had their body cam on, and maybe they did the calculation that this wouldn't be worth it if they were in the wrong and it could turn out to be bad for them and they just wanted to get out of there. But I think that that's an important note to all this on how to de-escalate these situations. But I
Yeah.
think I'm hearing you too, and I agree. I've had police officers try to say things to me several times throughout the years while I'm riding, and I just like refuse that whole interaction because just the idea that they're gonna. I've had cops like roll their window down and try to say things to me on my bike, and it's like that could be scary to me. Like I may just like, you
Yeah.
can't do that to someone in a car. You wouldn't, So just the
Yeah.
fact of getting pulled over and getting talked to by a cop can be, a thing for folks, especially when you're doing everything right, which it sounds like in this case, y'all were doing everything right. So what's been I remember when you first launched these, you were talking about kind of making it a party ride. What is the general vibe on these rides? Are people like, who's it attracting? Who's showing up, and kind of what's the demeanor of the riders that come out?
Yeah. It's a great mix of folks, of riders that come out. We have a wide age range that show up. We've had some high schoolers partake in our ride before over the recent months, and we've some of our riders are 50s and 60s. Like we have a wide variety of people participating, a pretty diverse group. And as far as the vibe, we luckily we were able to collaborate with the Westside
Oh
Transportation
yeah,
Alliance, the
yeah.
WTA,
Hmm.
um, and they were able to basically get us a grant to help fund a music speaker
Hmm.
for the Ride Westside group. And so, we have a music trailer. We just kind of go out and just vibe, right? Like
Nice.
ultimately, one of the goals of that ride are basically just to bring the community together and to have a good time. We want to show that the West Side community is full of cyclists, and we deserve a safe infrastructure there as well. And part of that is that we do assert the bicyclist right to ride in the street as part of the critical mass, like
Whatever.
ethos, right? It's super, like it's just super good vibes. Cascade Bikes has been great, taking good care of us most of the times. I think almost all the times. I haven't heard about this one, but I'm so far. I mean, they've been providing coffee and donuts to folks in the morning before we kick off, and then Ben over at Berry, he's been taking good care of us. We recently started using his shop as an endpoint, again, to just further encourage that community, the West Side community environment.
So route wise, are you trying to stay off the main roads? Are you taking, like, what are you doing?
So we just got it started this summer, and you know, I would look at it as a iterative process. You know, so this year so far, we've been starting at Cascade and riding out to Hillsboro to the farmers market, where we kind of break and disperse. And so far, we've been bouncing back and forth between riding from Beaverton out via Jenkins Baseline, Main Street, or a little further north is the Walker East-West corridor. We're trying to keep it a realistic distance to not exclude folks, right? But like frankly, there's really just not bike routes that go back and forth between Beaverton and Hillsboro. And that's part of the point of the ride, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the third major road that we could ride would be TV Highway, but we need to double or triple our ride counts at least before I would be willing to take that on. I would
Yeah.
love to have the numbers to do that, but at this point, out of just concern for the safety of the ride, like TV's off limits right now. But the next ride's posted and is scheduled for Saturday morning, October 25th. We meet up at Cascade starting at 9. Usually folks roll up between 9:30 and 10, and we look to roll out at 10, roll out just after 10. We do pretty much the usual like kind of ride announcement kind of stuff before we get going, but it's good. Good vibes. People are just out kind of hanging out, jamming to the whatever music we have playing that time and just having a good time riding bikes.
Yeah, I asked about the route because for folks that aren't as familiar with the West Side in Washington County, it's a serious consideration. Kind of like you said, the roads there with the speed differentials are like serious, and not only that, but a lot of drivers just aren't used, including also cops, aren't used to seeing people on bikes. So that's also a little more dicey when you're in that situation. But you can't. It's not like there's a grid network of neighborhood streets either, so you really can't avoid them. So I'm glad to hear that you are tackling some of the bigger streets because I do think that's super important. And I also hear your caution about TV Highway for sure and getting more numbers. So that'd be a good goal for maybe next year to get to TV Highway if you can manage it. But I'm just curious, do you think there's any takeaways from the police thing? Is this something that folks are still talking about, or is it going to change the ride in any way?
I kind of think that we don't need to change a thing, frankly. And you know, if they had pulled us over or stopped the ride in a different area of the ride where there was a bike lane and we were in a travel lane and everything, I still don't think I would want to change anything. I think in its essence, a critical mass ride is a form of protest, and frankly, on the west side, you know, there's a lot of bike lanes out on the west side, but at the end of the day, a lot of people are uncomfortable riding those bike lanes. And, in my opinion, a piece of paint is a bare minimum that the cycling world needs or wants. I mean, especially with like within the ride west side like bike community, we by nature inherently on the west side, there's a lot more families and a lot more kids, like from my like I guess opinion or perspective, what have you. That's more like we try to target more of those kind of riders who are more or less like leisure riders rather than pro riders because we want to get more people out. And when I'm looking around at the infrastructure, people aren't going to take their kids out on a bike lane with traffic whizzing by at 45 to 55 or 65 plus if the drivers are speeding. And that's just not going to happen. If we had a curb or even more type of safe, dedicated, protected bike lanes, absolutely that would get more people out.
I hear you on that. I think one thing I've learned over the years working with cops and bikes is if one thing that could be happening is now that they did stop you, and I'm hoping, especially the fact that there was some follow up or whatever, there was a complaint. Hopefully, it sparked some conversation in the bureau so that when they go to roll call, when they have their meetings before their shifts, they have talked about it. And now I'm sure I would not be surprised, I should say, that if from now on, when they see you, they're going to understand that, and there would be like communication of like, oh, looks like those people are out again. It looks like the critical mass. So I think that's in some ways a good thing because now critical mass is like a known quantity. So
Yeah.
Until there's like a huge change, like if you were to have a ton of people or if riders are more, I mean, that can always change. But I think in some ways that can be good because it's on the radar of the police now, and they may have some way of understanding it. Where I think it's reasonable to think that maybe these officers were just like kind of shocked and surprised, and they were coming off a call from a driver that was probably completely unhinged and like saying things that maybe the riders weren't doing from the other side of the windshield perspective kind of thing. So it sounds like I'm trying to give the cops the benefit of the doubt here, which I'm not, but trying to explain a sort of how they might have seen this and how it might, impact the ride going forward. So.
Well, what's interesting is on just about every ride I have noticed, the Watch Coast sheriff I've seen a Washco Sheriff vehicle drive the opposite direction past our ride most, if not every one of our rides. And all they do is they just kind of look at us and I give them a head nod and that's the extent, right? Uh, so it's interesting to me that it was only once we were into Hillsborough jurisdiction did anything actually happen. Um, Now, to flip this into, again, where you're going, I think flipping this into a positive thing, I've heard through the cycling community that, I've heard rumors, again, these are second and third hand. I've heard rumors that the Hillsborough mayor is super pro cycling and wants to be more involved and more engaged and to be doing more for the West Side cycling community. And I'm thrilled to hear that. And I would very much encourage not only the Hillsborough mayor, I would also encourage the Beaverton mayor, and I would encourage any other government official to stop into our happy hours and just hang out with the bike community, hear what we have to say, hear the complaints, and hear just the good vibes. The West Side, we have a lot less riders than Portland does, but we have a really strong community out here. And so it's fantastic because on like a lot of the rides that a lot of the West Side rides that are posted up on Shift, you're going to see similar faces across most of the West Side rides, and that really helps to make our community strong because you're not seeing the one and done riders, you're seeing reoccurring folks that show up and ride and just vibe together and are out just to ride bikes and have fun, and that really makes me happy. Like that's the whole point of like doing a happy hour and things like that, is to just bring out the community and bring people together.
Love it. So okay, so on that note, how do people plug into Bike Happy Hour on the West Side? What the dates and times and location?
Yeah. I'm happy to talk more about that too. So our bike happy hour on the west side, we meet at BG's Food Cartel. It's pretty much Central Beaverton. You can get off at the Central Beaverton Max stop at the Round, and it's like a 2-minute walk from the Max station. It's a really big food cart pod. There's like 20, 30 food carts there. You don't even have to buy food. Like, frankly, just show up and hang out. We're okay with that. It's a family friendly atmosphere. We've established our routines as the second and fourth Monday
Okay.
every month.
Second and
And
fourth
that's
Monday, BG's Food Cartel. Okay.
Yep. And that's rain or shine. We we'll be there.
Sounds good, Rob. Okay, everybody, get in the routine of checking out the Westside Bike Happy Hour, and the next critical mass is, I think you said, October 24th, right?
Yep.
So you can
And
check the shift list.
our next happy hour is Monday the 13th, and then again Monday the 27th.
All
Uh,
right.
I also just want to take a quick second. The Bike Happy Hour is, we got it started last summer. We've had a pretty great summer this year. We've had reps come out and talk to the group from TriMet, talking about the TV Highway Transportation Safety Project. They're looking to add a lot more TriMet resources to TV Highway. So they were talking to our crew about that. The city of Beaverton has come out to talk about their transportation safety plan. Washington County has been out to talk the Washington County Transportation Safety Plan. Earlier in the year, Ride Westside also collaborated to do a personal safety workshop for cyclists. That was back in June. And then I just also want to call out a couple other like regional groups. I'm sure a lot of folks will be familiar with this, but the West Side Transportation Alliance, the WTA, they're really paramount, and we collaborate with them frequently. I also want to shout out to the Street Trust. I want to shout out Bike Loud, and I also want to just give a quick shout out to the West Side Wednesday Ride. They're a great group of folks, super fun rides. If you're up for a little more adventure, a little faster pace kind of rides, uh, check them out as well.
It's one of my perennial disappointments that's the same night as my Bike Happy Hour that I need to really be at, and I'm just like racking my brain of the day, like when would I actually just not go to Bike Happy Hour to do Westside Wednesday? So I don't have to think about it now because I can't keep up with them at this point with my knees still recovering. But
Yeah.
maybe next spring I'll have to jump over there and do something over there. Well, Rob, thanks so much.
Cool.
I appreciate you coming over and sharing this with us and checking in about the West Side. Keep pushing out there, doing great stuff. It's really good to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate the time.